there, and welcome back to another episode of Work is Rigged, the show where we explore what it's actually like to be neurodivergent in the workplace. My name is Veronica and I am your host and the career coach behind Atypical Careers. This week, I'm so excited to be continuing my conversation with Allegra Chapman. Allegra is a fellow AuDHD professional, as well as an author and a columnist, and the coach behind Creative Fix, where she helps neurodivergent professionals and other chronically ill and disabled individuals figure out how to nurture and develop their creativity. Now, this week, we're going to be having a great conversation about why creativity dies in the corporate world, what job hopping actually is like as a neurodivergent professional, and what it means to redefine what success is at work. So, without further ado, let's jump back in.
We've talked a lot right now about what currently doesn't work in the workforce. As you said, the transition is going to be really slow. And unfortunately, for a lot of us neurodivergent folks, we don't have the luxury of time when it comes to surviving and getting our basic needs met and staying employed and trying to survive employment when we manage to get it.
This is what we're seeing now is so many neurodivergent people are becoming self-employed. And this was the struggle that I had, was that when I was previously kind of running this diversity and inclusion consultancy and just banging my head against the brick wall with corporates that didn't want to change, that in the end I just went, I don't want to do this anymore. And so I stepped away from that. And now I work with creatives and entrepreneurs, and a lot of them are neurodivergent people who have stepped away from the workplace because it just didn't work for them. And I think for a lot of people that has been the solution, is designing their own way of working and their own environment, their own business, that making their own rules that they can follow. And it's definitely worked for me, that I used to think, oh my God, why are there so many things that everybody else seems to be able to do that I can't do and that I really struggle with, and why is this not working for me? And now that I can work in my own way and I can follow my own patterns and work with my own energy and work in a way that suits me, I'm like, oh, actually everything's fine. I just needed to not be being pushed into this box that wasn't right for me. Like, in terms of what helped me survive when I was in there, I mean, I don't know if I'm useful in that area, because what I did to survive was keep changing jobs every kind of year or couple of years, because I was like, I can't do this anymore. And I would move, and then, it would be better for about, 3 months. And I'd be like, no, this is awful again. Then I would move again. So, and I think that's a pattern that a lot of neurodivergent people know well.
That was me too, actually. So after I graduated university, never really used my journalism degree until now. Actually, I'm a podcast host now. Hello. I went into marketing. I went in by way of copywriting, and I was really good at my job. For the first 6 months, you couldn't tell me anything. I was so good at what I did. People were like, oh my gosh, you're a rock star, or whatever you are, whatever trendy word they were using to try and motivate people at work those days. I was working a lot in startups, especially tech startups, a lot of creating a lot of educational content and stuff. But more often than not, I was a one-person marketer with zero budget, just trying to make it happen. And I was eager to please, because at the time I operated on the assumption that if I succeeded at work, I would be a successful person. I have challenged that since then. But I would indeed start burning out inevitably after several months of working at a pace that now I know was not sustainable. And then people would be like, oh, but what happened? You were so good before, as if I could control it. Do you think that I want this terrible rep? After that, I would just job hop from job to job. I think I had close to 10 or 11 jobs within a 10-year span or something crazy like that. And I really hid it like a dirty little secret. I'm I would go to a job interview and I knew that they would inevitably ask me, why did you leave your last job? And I would have to come up with something cute oh, it was a mutual decision, or for really, really vague healthcare reasons or something. But it felt bad. It felt like I had committed a crime. And I was like, I didn't commit a crime. I literally just like my mental health and my physical health gave out. That's not something to be ashamed for. Why do I feel so terrible about this? Why do I feel like I'm letting everyone down and I'm such a terrible person? And I was also diagnosed late. I was diagnosed in my 30s. And of course, you look back and you're like, oh, if I had that information, I could have beat myself up so much less. I mean, the world was probably going to still beat me up, but I didn't have to help them.
Yeah. Oh God, that sounds familiar. And this is the thing, isn't it? That we, as a people, neurodivergent people tend to follow a really similar pattern, that we will work so hard and we will give everything, because especially if you weren't diagnosed until late, you have probably lived a huge chunk of your life feeling like you weren't quite right somehow, like you weren't quite fitting people's expectations and you weren't quite living up to your potential. Like I think so many people heard that growing up, like, oh, you have so much potential. I don't know what that means and I don't know what I was supposed to do with it, but apparently I didn't do it. And, so we always had this feeling of, I need to be better. I need to be different. I need to, and so we achieved hard, and we did everything we could to be the best in class and the best at school and the best at university and the best in the workplace. And we just absolutely worked our asses off, because kind of like you were saying, I think we had this belief that if we could just achieve enough, then we would be worthy and we would be lovable and we would be okay, because we just had grown up with this sense that we just weren't quite right for some reason that we couldn't really articulate. And I mean, hyperfocus plays a role here, right? You get into something and you're like, yeah, I'm going to do this. And you absolutely throw yourself into it. But then inevitably you crash, because nobody can keep that up long term. And especially when you don't really get that much appreciation for it. Like, people tell you you're doing a great job, but then because you're doing a great job, they give you 10 more things to do, because it's like, oh, Veronica, you're doing brilliantly, have some more work. And it's like, wait, what? So
I can't tell you how many times that happened to me, where they were just like, Veronica, you're doing such a great job, so we're going to give you the most difficult projects that are on our docket right now. You can do it. Go for it.
So my degree is in English and philosophy. So if you want to talk about degrees we don't use, I see your journalism and I raise you English and philosophy. And then I went into the charity sector. And then I got burnt out with that. And then I went off to do a master's degree in publishing. That was probably the most ADHD thing I've ever done. An advert popped up for a publishing MA on my internet browser when I was having a rough day at work. And I was like, I like books. I like writing. I could work in publishing. And 3 months later, I had quit my job. I had moved from Manchester to London and I was studying an MA. That's the most ADHD thing I've ever done. But yeah, so I did publishing for a while. I worked as an editor for a few years. That doesn't pay any money, it turns out. So I went into marketing, left that, went into diversity and inclusion. I used to also be like, oh God, I've moved around so much. I've not just moved jobs, but I've also moved sectors, all of these things. And then I went into an interview once and I sat down and the hiring manager said to me, wow, you've had such an interesting career. You've worked in loads of different jobs. And I braced for the kind of to excuse myself. And she went, that's amazing. You've got such a rich variety of experience. And I went, oh, yeah, I do. And it completely changed the way that I looked at my career. And actually now when I look back, and I can see a thread running through it, like communication was always a big thing. I am a writer, so words and communication and connection was always a big theme throughout my work, community, working with people, strategy, strategic thinking, all of that sort of stuff there's been threads that run through. But actually, I've worked in loads of different sectors and I have experience from loads of different angles. And now when I work with neurodivergent creatives and I work with small business owners, and I am able to be the bridge between those two kind of things, because I understand the creative world, I understand writing, I understand publishing, but I also understand business strategy and marketing. So I can help people kind of come at both of those. Like, if you're really great at writing, but you don't know how to sell yourself, or if you're really great at selling your business, but you don't know how to be creative, hi, I'm your girl. So it gives me this opportunity to bring these different threads together and to weave different things together. And actually, we don't value that in our culture. Workplaces want you to be really laser focused, and every job wants you to be really passionate about the sector. Even if it's a job in McDonald's, they're like, I want you to be really passionate about this. And it's like, really, are you expecting people to be passionate about flipping burgers? No, full well, they just need the money. Like, nobody is applying to you because they're passionate about the job. Stop asking for that. People want you to be so dedicated and so fixated on that one sector, and actually we miss out on the value that somebody with different perspectives can bring into the workplace when they've had varied careers.
I have this theory that employers want you to be laser focused and consistent and predictable with your career path, because somehow in their brain that translates to this person will be easier to manage, will be easier to control. But in reality, if you are only good at one thing and you only have one perspective, like that's not, I mean, like obviously there are nuances within that specialty. You would call that person a specialist, and that there is a need for that. But then when you realize that what you actually need is a generalist, somebody who has a lot of different experiences from different perspectives and everything, you're like, oh God, where did these people go? Well, these people are the ones that you have been reprimanding for having like job hopping on their resume for years and years. And you've been like, why do you keep changing your mind? Why do you keep getting distracted? Why don't you stay focused on one thing? And then finally, when we've endured 10 years of this, they're suddenly like, oh my God, you're exactly what I'm looking for. You are the unicorn that I've been searching for. Thank goodness you exist. And we're just like, you couldn't have given me some of that encouragement along the way beforehand. You were just kind of like stomping me into the ground until I became something that you could actually use. Like, that's kind of what it feels like to me.
Yeah, that's actually such an interesting way of thinking about it. Somebody looks at a CV where someone's hopped around a lot and they think, oh, this person isn't going to stay because they job hop a lot. But okay, maybe they're not. Like, maybe they're not going to stay with you forever. But does that matter? Like, is that important? Do you need everybody in your team to be staying forever? Because honestly, how many people do stay in jobs now for 20 years? Like, this doesn't happen anymore. Having now kind of looked at it from the other side and come in as a consultant to work with big businesses, often when I go in, it's the people who've been there for 10, 20 years who are disillusioned, disconnected, bored. Like you say, you need some specialists. You need people who really understand the ins and outs of a particular system or process. And you need people who can come in with a different perspective and go, okay, I get that you've already done it this way, but actually, what if you looked at it this way? And I think that is the problem, is that we tend to think there is a good and a bad, and we have to hire the good people. And we're not making space for different types of people. I'm getting a lot of people coming to me now saying, oh, hey, you work with creatives, you work all about creativity. Could you come and do a workshop with my team about how to be more creative? We're not getting enough new ideas. We're not getting enough innovation. People aren't problem solving or whatever. And I'm always like, I can, but you're not going to like what I have to say, because that you have designed a culture that actively prevents people from being creative, and you have set up your workplace in a way that people cannot problem solve, cannot think innovatively. So, you're going to need to change your whole system, and very few leaders are willing to hear that.
I imagine it kind of like you have a really barren backyard and you're like, I want to grow this rose bush. And so you plant a rose bush, but you don't give it any sun. You don't give it any water. You just kind of leave it out there to let the birds have at it and everything. And you're wondering, why isn't it blooming? Why is it not blooming? Why is it not doing its job? I literally put you there so that you would bloom, so that I could enjoy the flowers, and you're not living up to your side of the bargain. But maybe what it takes is the right conditions to be met in order for that bloom to happen. And I imagine that's the very same with creativity. I think every human has some degree of creativity in them, but we don't create those environments for it to bloom.
100%. I think that is such a good metaphor. Everybody is creative. This is a hill I will die on. Every single human being is creative. We have prioritized art as a species. It's so important to us. Creativity is how we make sense of the world. It's how we make sense of ourselves. It's how we communicate. It's how we understand each other. It is such a core part of who we are. You're talking about planting the rose bush. I live on the coast in England, the very south coast, and we have very chalky soil here. As I discovered to my when I first moved here and tried to plant a whole load of stuff and everything died. And I was like, what's happening? You can't just throw anything in there and expect it to thrive. It's got to be right for the conditions. And if you want a particular plant to grow, you're going to need to create those conditions. You have to have an environment where it can thrive. You cannot be creative if you are in back-to-back meetings from 9 a.m. till 5 p.m. You cannot be creative if your phone is pinging every 5 minutes with another email that you have to respond to, or, if you're expected to be responsive 24/7, or, if you are just being constantly asked to task switch and do more things, that you cannot be creative. Brain processes happen when our brain is resting. So when your brain is kind of on autopilot and it enters something called the default mode network, your brain isn't kind of consciously thinking about what you're doing. So your conscious mind is kind of free to wander off while your subconscious is kind of taking the wheel. It's why everybody has all their best ideas in the shower. So there's a story about Aaron Sorkin, who wrote The West Wing and lots of other great TV shows. He apparently, because he had all of his best ideas in the shower, he had a shower installed in his office, and he would take like 6 showers a day or something. And it's like, okay, Aaron, but the reason you were having the great ideas wasn't because you were wet. Like, the shower isn't the vehicle. We need space, and we need rest, and we need time to think, and we need creative ways to process our thoughts, and we need opportunities to just experiment and play and try things out and see what happens. And we need to be free to make mistakes and not worry that we're going to lose our job if something goes wrong. All of these things are really, really important, but we have built a culture where that is just not possible.
And I remember, because before I started this career coaching thing, I was a marketer for 10 years. I still do marketing for my own business, so I still consider myself one. But marketing has always kind of been advertised to the people in the industry as a really great hybrid between creative work and business, like, strategy and all that kind of stuff. And for a long time, I was like, yeah, I really enjoy having that kind of like combination of those two areas. I'm quite good at both of them, and so I can kind of blend it together. But thinking back, the work I was doing, designing content or putting together like social media and stuff, that was not really creative work. I had to learn very, very early that it was a lot less of like me processing my emotions and expressing myself and like, putting out a very unique perspective on life, which is what I really think art is, versus putting together a template on Canva, plugging in all of the color hex code so that it aligns with the brand guidelines. It basically makes it very, very formulaic. Now, we've managed to create a formula that manages to mimic art or mimic creativity to a certain degree. There came a point where I really had to learn how to just stay completely detached from anything that I was making, because I knew that some higher up who had no idea the first thing about design or copywriting or anything was inevitably going to tell me to do something stupid with the work that I worked on. I swear, one time I worked for a company and they insisted that I write this entire article for like a big newspaper in Canada, and it had no call to action, which as a marketer was crazy. I was like, why would you spend thousands of dollars putting this feature article in this huge newspaper, and you wouldn't even put your website, you wouldn't put a way for them to contact you? They were like, Veronica, it'll be fine. Why are you making such a big deal out of this? Why are you not being a team player? And I'm just like,
Oh my
so
God.
yeah.
I'm having flashbacks now. When you were talking about
I
brand
feel like I've triggered
guidelines,
something in you right now.
yeah, I'm having a moment right now. I'm reliving, like, as soon as you were talking about brand guidelines and hex codes, I was like, no, God, I was right back there.
I am so sorry for bringing you back there. I am sorry for resurfacing the trauma. Everything will be okay. You don't work there anymore. You are safe. You are safe.
It's the difference is, right, it's paint by numbers versus making your own painting. Like, that's what it is. You can be creative a little bit, if you're making a social media post for a brand, but you have to do it within very strict guidelines. And yeah, same, like the amount of posts I made that were, well, in my opinion, genius, that would then get rejected for the most ridiculous reasons. And I remember wanting to do something kind of controversial for a client. It wasn't that controversial, but a little bit edgy for a client. And when I was working for an agency, and I ran it by my boss, and I was like, "What do you think of this?" And she was like, "Yes, post it. That's great." So we did it. I posted it. The next thing I know, there was like a whole meltdown situation. I got called into a meeting, like 5 different people yelled at me. The client was on the phone. You would think that like something terrible had happened. I had to take it down instantly because it wasn't like they didn't think it was in line with their brand voice enough, which was kind of fine, but I don't think merited the amount of like crisis communications they met. I think I got a couple of likes. There was no real reaction to it. It was just they completely had a meltdown. But what really upset me about it was my boss in the meeting was like, "Yeah, we're really disappointed in you, Allegra. Like, it's such a shame." And I was like, you told me to do it. And it was just like, absolutely stabbed me in the back. But I did have some clients though that they did just give me free rein and they let me do whatever I wanted. And I did do some really fun things for them. This brand had a whole free from food section. I came up with this like free from bake off thing. We did this whole free from competition and it was really fun. I got like celebrity judges involved to like judge people's cakes and it was so much fun to work on because nobody was sat over my shoulder going like, "Oh, I don't like that shade of green. You need to tweak that. And that squirrel's in the wrong place." Like there was nobody was interfering. I just did it. And it was great because it was, this is what social media should be about. It was a real community campaign. And that's what can happen. I think when you have a bit of creative freedom and you are just allowed to, just connect with people on a human level, because that's what marketing should be.
So many neurodivergent folks that I work with, they don't really derive their motivation for work from getting paid. Like, we know money is valuable. We know that having money will make life more comfortable and give us access to things. But the actual idea of getting a paycheck is not usually enough to make us feel like all of the hoops we have to jump through and all of the minefields we have to cross are worth it. But what we do tend to connect a lot more with are people and creating events and creating experiences. Like all those things I think are fundamentally part of the human experience. And a lot of that ties into the elements of creativity that you were mentioning earlier. We don't live to input data into a spreadsheet. Well, you know what? There is one autistic person out there who is just saying, "Veronica, how dare you? I live for spreadsheets." But, for anybody else who doesn't align with, I'm sorry, by the way, to that one person. But, most of us are here for things beyond what the workplace can offer us right now. Like, the workplace tells us that we can derive our sense of worth and sense of value from spending every day and giving it our all. But actually, that is a narrative that is perfectly designed to keep us easier to control, keep us in line, and keep us scared from losing their approval and losing that sense of stability. And yes, you should be scared of losing some sense of stability because, of course, we have enough stuff going on as neurodivergent people that we don't need another curveball thrown our way. Like, we just don't need it. And we're not talking about all of this stuff to be all doom and gloom and you're like condemned to this life of servitude and whatever. It can feel like that. But it's important to understand these dynamics at play so that you don't internalize more of this narrative than you absolutely have to. Because if you are going to survive this world of work, we need to play the long game. We need to be strategic. We need to really understand what are the factors that we are working against so that we can try and adjust our own approach so that we can better survive it and hopefully even find some purpose or some joy in it, maybe even.
You're right. I think neurodivergent people in particular, I think it's probably true of everybody, but I think neurodivergent people maybe more so really crave meaning. in their work. Like, we spend too much time at work to be doing something that feels pointless. And the person listening who loves spreadsheets, like, I'm really glad there are people out there who love spreadsheets, because we need those people. But I think as well, it's about, what does that spreadsheet mean? Because designing that spreadsheet, really loving Excel. I mean, my husband is an absolute whiz on Excel, and he loves it, and he can do all the cool formula things. I love a bit of data. Like, I really enjoy data, not to that extent. But he loves it. And he actually has left his corporate job and retrained as a plumber now. So Excel spreadsheets are less his bag, but he really enjoys it. If you feel like there's a really good reason why you're working on this spreadsheet, and it's doing something valuable for somebody, or it's serving a good purpose, then there can be a huge amount of meaning in data entry. So there's all sorts of ways that you can find meaning from your job. And so much of our identity is bound up with that for that reason. Because if you're searching for meaning in your job, then that becomes a really big part of who you are. Then the kind of flip side, if you feel like you are not getting enough from that, or you're not doing that in a way that is meeting with approval, then you feel like you are failing at this really cool part of you. And I think that's a huge strand of what I want to address in the work that I do, is for people to stop blaming themselves and stop criticizing themselves, and start to look at the system, because it's not you that's wrong. It's the system that is failing us. It's something that I write about in my new book, so Divergent Creatives, starting to challenge that idea that there is a right way to do things and you're not doing it right, and to start leaning into more what works for you.
Exactly. We've covered so many really amazing topics here. I would like to know if there is anything you want neurodivergent professionals, especially the ones who identify as a creative soul, and we all know how hard it is to be creative in this world. What kind of information or advice might you leave them with?
Oh gosh. Having faith in yourself. And it's not easy, because I think so much of this world is so busily trying to tell us that we are wrong. And that's not just for neurodivergent people. There is so much messaging out there that is telling us that there's something wrong with us and we're flawed. And so we automatically just assume that everything that doesn't work out is because we're wrong. And I think the biggest thing that we can all do is to push back on that. Why is it my responsibility to fit this box? Why can't the system work differently? And it's not necessarily that you're going to be able to charge into your workplace tomorrow and make them change everything, because for the many reasons we've discussed, they may be very resistant to change. But I think at least if you know in yourself that it isn't necessarily all on you, and that it's not necessarily you that's the problem, then at least you can protect your own mental health and your own sense of self, rather than feeling chipped away at it. And I think it's why podcasts like this and conversations like you're having with people are so important, because just the whole name, Work is Rigged, it gives people that opportunity to go, oh wait, yeah, the game is stacked against me, so it's okay that I'm finding it hard, because it's intended to be hard for people like me.
Allegra, thank you so much for taking the time to join us on this podcast, and for such a great conversation on what it's like to be a creative neurodivergent person in this crazy world of work that we have to navigate. Once again, Allegra Chapman is an author, columnist, and fellow AuDHDer. She is also a writer, activist, and creativity coach, and the founder of Creative Fix. Definitely check her out. And if you want more career resources designed specifically for neurodivergent professionals, definitely give us a follow at atypicalcareers.com. Any last thoughts you want to share before we wrap up today, Allegra?
I just want to say thank you so much for having me. I've absolutely loved talking to you. It's been a real pleasure.
Amazing. Yes, and we'll have to have you again sometime. But for now, just remember, work is rigged, and the only thing that can truly fix you is a brand new notebook. That is a joke. But thank you very much, and we'll see you next time.